You Don't Know Flack. You Don't Know Flack.
Welcome to You Don't Know Flack, a podcast full of stories about retro gaming, retro computing, video games, arcade games, and technology from a guy who was there and still is. My name is Rob O'Hara, but for the next 30 minutes, you can call me Flack.
Episode 120. Radio Scanners.
White Squad, can you hold me down at the wake on 79th Street?
You know whether it's panic or not, then don't say. And that's the only alarm today. I have no history, no EMS removals, anything that I know of.
Okay, whoever is radio 5926. Do you just have an emergency out there? Alright, well it must be you with the bad radio then. Can you use your partners and 724s on the air for the mobile?
How can you call Markham? Sure, I'll call his phone.
You're gonna coming in, try it again.
34?
234? Which park? Harrison?
Yes, at Harrison Park.
I'm waiting for the callers to come out. Cedric is wearing a brown jacket, jeans, and brown boots. Unknown if he has a weapon today, but as opposed to caller in the past with a knife and a hammer.
Your girlfriend's father?
The girlfriend's child's father. He's having a problem with the girlfriend's child's father.
What's the address again?
1646 East 69th Street. 1646 East 69th Street, 3rd floor. Calvin. And the guy outside is waiting for him to come out is a male black wearing a brown jacket, jeans, and brown boots.
Commercial alarm 3058 Belmont, prison partial, front door motion.
1206 George.
06 George.
19th and Loomis. Can I run an Illinois ID?
Yeah, go with it.
2005 0165 322 boy.
Stand by, let's see what you get. She is on parole. I'm just flipping through the pages here. Give me one more second.
Feel good.
Good signal. He's a parolee, but clear.
10-4. He's on parole for burglary?
You know, I don't know if it states here. Let me take a quick gander. They say there was about 7 people loading in front of the liquor store and gang banging, and it's a female across the street with a long coat and white boots, throwing gang signs and making threats to the guys across the street for the liquor store. All right, now 12 and 11. Domestic battery at 6300 South King. 6300 South King, domestic battery. Miss Taylor's going to be in front of the currency exchange. Says she was jumped on by the boyfriend and he took her cell phone. He's a male, black, 22, light complected with dreads. They short and slim, red and black coat and black pants. She said he was last seen running eastbound on 63rd. Okay, so I have to spot this nice gentleman.
312, I got out for it.
Oh, okay.
Hello and welcome to episode 120 of You Don't Know Flack. On today's show we're going to be talking about radio scanners, those little devices that allow you to listen in and eavesdrop on the world around us. What you were just listening to is a live radio feed of the Chicago Fire and Ambulance radio frequencies. We're going to talk a little bit about how that is possible for me to listen to in Oklahoma. I'll be sharing some old stories about my experiences with scanners and some of the things you can listen to and how all that works. So we got a long show ahead of us, so let's go ahead and get started with episode 120, You Don't Know Flack, Radio Scanners. I first became interested in radio scanners back in the 1980s, in the early BBS days. One of the things hackers would trade along with software was information. I talked about a little bit about in the last episode how hackers would trade passwords, default security settings, long distance codes, things like that, information on BBSs. And another thing they would trade occasionally, I remember downloading a file that was filled with radio frequencies, and I didn't really understand what somebody could use those for, but it turns out you had to have a radio scanner to pick up those frequencies. So I had seen these files, but I didn't really have any way to use that information at that time. It wasn't until the early 90s, when I was going to college and working for a local newspaper, that I actually saw radio scanners being in use. They were used by the newspaper to track police and ambulance and emergency communications. So that's one way that the newspaper would find out about things that were going on. They would hear communication between the dispatcher and police officers or rescue personnel, telling them about emergencies, and the newspaper would find out about it at the same time, so they could dispatch a reporter out. So that's how you got your breaking news stories. I guess I never thought about owning my own scanner until I attended HoHoCon, the hacker conference I talked about in the last episode 119. And I saw several people with radio scanners at HoHoCon. Some people were obviously using them to try and listen to law enforcement. Other people use them just for fun to listen to different things. So, but I thought the whole thing was pretty interesting. So when I came back from HoHoCon, a couple of months after I got back, I remember it was the spring of '95, I bought my first handheld radio scanner. I got it at Radio Shack. It runs off of 6 AA batteries, or it has a 12-volt adapter. So you can plug it into a cigarette light adapter in your car, which I'll get into the legalities a bit here shortly, or you can just plug it in your house and run it off of an outlet. The type of radio scanners that I'm talking about today don't allow you to broadcast. You can't talk to anyone on these. You can only listen to other things that are being broadcast. Of course, there are scanners and radio transmitters that you can send, but these are strictly designed just to listen to other things that are being broadcast. And one thing that was interesting about the one that I bought was there is a large section of frequencies that are blocked out, and that has to do with the actual FCC laws. So on the first scanner that I bought, the scanning frequencies goes up to around 900, and then when we're talking about hertz here, it goes up to about 900 hertz and stops and skips to 1300. So we'll talk a little bit about what we are not allowed to listen to with these scanners and ways to get around that. So what does a radio scanner pick up? And the answer is whatever is being broadcast. Most handheld scanners, the handheld scanner I have came with a 6-inch antenna. So this is not, we're not talking about an antenna that you have to mount on top of your house or in your attic, anything like that. This is a tiny, small antenna. This looks basically just like a handheld CB radio or a walkie-talkie even. But it's amazing that inside my house with this tiny little antenna, you can pick up all sorts of things being broadcast 24 hours a day. So some of the things that you can pick up with just a normal, unmodified radio scanner. Number one, as I just showed at the beginning of the program, you can pick up emergency channels. That's essentially what you'll hear is conversations between dispatchers and police officers, fire, rescue, ambulance, things like that. They still use normal broadcast radios that go back and forth, and those radios are so powerful that you can pick them up in your house even with a small antenna. There are also information channels. There are stations that broadcast weather and news alerts, so you can pick those up on handheld scanners. There are also weird channels out there. I'll talk a little bit about number stations. I don't think that a handheld scanner is strong enough, the antenna is strong enough to pick up most number stations. That would be more for like a ham radio or something with a larger antenna, but they're still pretty interesting, so I'm going to talk a little bit about those. Anything that broadcasts, for example, drive-through speakers. And as idiotic as this sounds, for some reason, it has always been entertaining to listen to other people order food on drive-through systems. And for anyone that's ever worked in a fast food restaurant with a drive-through system, I know that both of the restaurants I worked in had a feature where if you hold down one button, you can talk to the customers and drive through. If you hold down the other button, you can talk to other employees that are also wearing the headset. And so with a handheld scanner, you can listen to those conversations. I don't know that I've ever sat outside of a drive-through restaurant just to listen to people talk, but back when I first got my scanner and all this was new and exciting, I did take my scanner with me if I went through a drive-through restaurant and would at least listen to what was going on while I was there ordering food. So another thing, things inside your house that broadcast outside of your house, things that a lot of people don't think about. Number one, cordless phones. Now, cordless phones have changed throughout the years. You remember the old cordless phones that were often advertised as having 10 different channels? Those broadcast loud and clear. And even if the handset didn't have a very strong signal to broadcast, the base, which was also transmitting the conversations back to the handset, was much stronger. So it was very easy inside your house to pick up cordless phone conversations within a block radius of your home. There are newer types of cordless phones, and we'll talk a little bit about scrambling technology and quote-unquote encryption, but the bottom line is you can still pick these up today. Another thing is cell phone conversations. Now, most people think, well, cell phones, those are digital signals. You can't pick those up. But often cell phone signals go to a tower or to a repeater where they are then broadcast. A lot of signals can be combined together in what's called a trunk, and those can be repeated to another tower. Oftentimes, those signals are not encrypted. So, with a normal radio handheld scanner, I have listened to people's cell phone conversations, and I can verify this because I have been driving down the interstate, looked to the side of me, and seen someone talking on their cell phone and heard their conversation coming out of my scanner. I won't say that you can pick up every cell phone conversation, but cell phone conversations are still being broadcast in a way that radio scanners can pick them up. Another thing that a lot of people have in their house are baby monitors. So just by running through the list of frequencies, oftentimes you'll suddenly hear the inside of someone's house. You can hear people talking about what they're cooking for dinner, or you can hear baby crying, things like that. Whenever you get those type of signals, you're usually picking up someone's baby monitor. Also, the home intercom systems broadcast on similar frequencies. So any of these things that you have inside your house that you might not think about are probably or could be broadcasting those signals to within a block, maybe 2 blocks away from your house, where some creepy person like myself is sitting inside listening to what's going on in your house. So think about that when you go to bed. Another thing that has popularized radio scanners over the last several years is NASCAR and other types of races. So the communications that go on between the pit crews and the race car drivers also take place, of course, on regular radio frequencies. So with a handheld scanner, you can listen to the conversations between the crew and the driver and back. Another thing you can pick up with radio scanners is interference. A lot of people don't think about this, but there's a lot of radio interference out there. You get some from your car, you get some from electronics. I used to, back before we had smartphones and people didn't have things to do and they were sitting around bored, and my wife would go grocery shopping, sometimes I would sit in the car with my scanner just to see what I could pick up, if it was cell phones or cordless phones or whatever. A lot of times I noticed I would get interference from when the automatic doors on the grocery store would open and close. So there's all kinds of things out there that are just broadcasting these radio frequencies. Another interesting thing, if you happen to live or work by an airport, which I work right next to an airport, is you can pick up tower conversations as well. The conversations that are being broadcast from the tower to pilots and back. And then, of course, there are the handheld radios that are all over the city. Lots of city employees have these handheld radios, the two-way communication radios. You'll hear sanitation workers, you'll hear city workers, you'll hear all these people having conversations all day long who think they're just talking to one person, but really they're broadcasting their conversations all over the city. So there are lots and lots of things that with just a normal, unmodified, off-the-shelf radio scanner that you can listen to. Let's talk just for a moment about the legality of scanners. There are several laws that have to do with scanners, what you can listen to, how you can use them. All those laws differ state by state. So if you go to afn.org, and I'll put that in the show notes, there is a whole section about scanner laws. One law that most states have make it illegal to use a scanner in association with a crime, which I think is just a way of them to trump up one extra charge. But it is illegal if you're committing a crime. Then it is also illegal to use a scanner to listen to the police to help you evade in that crime. So criminals aren't really known for following laws in the first place, which is what makes them criminals. But that is one extra charge that you may find yourself facing if you have a handheld scanner and you are committing a crime. In addition, many states have laws preventing you from installing radio scanners into a vehicle. And the wording on some of these laws doesn't really make it clear. There are some states where people have had their scanners taken away by law enforcement because the scanner was plugged into a cigarette lighter, and the police officer decided that constituted the scanner being installed. Now, I would have to fight that personally, but it is, in some states, it is illegal to actually operate a mobile scanner at all inside a moving vehicle. So there are all kinds of little laws. Again, that website is afn.org. If you are planning on purchasing a radio scanner or already have one, you should probably check out the links and look at your state and see what laws apply to you. It is also, I believe, illegal to record anything that you pick up on a scanner. So I think I just broke the law with the opening of this episode of You Don't Know Flack. But I've always had a difficult time in following laws where I am picking up things that are being broadcast inside my own home. Years and years ago, in the early 80s, my dad had hooked up a microwave antenna in our house that would pick up HBO. This is before the movie channels started scrambling their signals. And I believe someone came to the house one time to ask him about the antenna, and his response is what my response would be, which is, I am picking up signals that you're broadcasting to my house. So if you don't want me to view that signal or watch that channel, then don't broadcast it to my house. So I kind of feel the same way, and I believe the law backs you up on this. If people are broadcasting radio signals or radio frequencies into your house, then it is your right to listen to them. Now, recording them, playing them back for other people, doing things like that, that's a different story. So, and also, all of this, what we're talking about is using a radio scanner to listen to things that are being broadcast. Obviously, if you're going to broadcast, then that's when you start to fall under the umbrella of the FCC licenses, all those sorts of things. So I would like to, I don't know very much about pirate radio. I would like to do an episode. I would like to learn more about that at some point. I know there are sound cards out there now that let you broadcast. So I would like to find out more about that. But again, everything that I've been talking about here is just for receiving transmissions. So, how do you find radio frequencies with a scanner like this? And there are basically 3 different ways on the scanner that I own. There are 3 different ways to listen. The first is you can punch in, just like it's very comparable to the radio in your car. So, to use some analogies like that, the first way that you can listen to a frequency is on the little keypad. You can punch in that frequency. So that's like if your favorite radio station is 100.1 or whatever. It's the same thing with a radio scanner. Police tend to use the same frequencies. They don't change because obviously they have to reconfigure all their equipment, or race car drivers have a specific frequency so they don't bleed over into the other drivers' frequencies. So if you know the frequency that you're looking for, and there are books and internet sites and all these things dedicated to radio frequencies. So if you know the frequency, the first way is just to punch that frequency into your scanner and you can listen to it. You can also save those frequencies into a bank or a group on most scanners, and you can scan through those. So that's kind of like the setting on your radio in your car where you scan through your preset radio stations. So again, what you've done at this point is programmed in multiple frequencies, and then you're just scanning through that bank of frequencies. And then the third way is what I would call is just a sweep, like on the radio in your car where you just hit seek and it goes and then it stops whenever it hits a frequency. You can do that with scanners too. So the original 10-channel cordless phones broadcast between, I believe, 46 and 47 hertz. So all you had to do was set your scanner to go from 46 to 47, hit scan, and it would loop through those frequencies. Like the old CB radios, most scanners also have a squelch button, and that's where you can determine how sensitive. You can basically set the level of what a no broadcast sounds like. So that way it doesn't just stop when they're static. So you could set that squelch on just like a medium level, and it would sit there and scan through and only stop and start broadcasting, or start picking up the signal whenever it heard someone on a cordless phone. So when I bought my first scanner, which, like I said, was back in 1995, I was living in a small town outside the city called El Reno, or as people have told me, El Ghetto. And there wasn't a lot of things to do in El Reno. I basically was living in an older home. It was about 30 minutes away from work, and 30 minutes outside the city. So there wasn't a lot to do out there. So I would sit there with the radio scanner, and it was a 2-story house. So I would go upstairs, and it seemed like at the time you could hear the entire city. I mean, with those 10 channels of cordless phones, I could pick up somebody's conversation on every channel. I could also pick up all the police and ambulance frequencies and listen to those conversations, which in El Ghetto, there were plenty of police and fire and ambulance calls going on all the time. Occasionally, when my friend would come over, my friend Steven, we would actually go out for evening walks and walk around the neighborhood, and I would take my scanner with me. And this kind of raises things to almost a creepy voyeur level, because based on the clarity of the signal and the volume, you could kind of tell how close you are to a signal. So more than once, we would find ourselves walking down the street and hear a signal getting louder and louder and louder, and then start to taper off as we kept walking, and we would then turn around and walk a few steps back, and we could actually, within a house or two, figure out what house people were talking on their phone. Occasionally, you would even see people, sitting on their front porch or in their living room with the shades open, and you could see people on the phone. So that kind of added a weird level to having the scanner. We didn't do that too often. So I had the scanner in 96 is when I moved to Spokane. And for a year and a half, Susan and I lived in an apartment complex. So if you think about how compact living conditions are in an apartment complex, it was even crazier there in the apartment. I mean, you could get cell phones. Cell phones were still fairly new in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, but cordless phones just all the time, And it we almost, because we were so bored in Spokane, we had like no extracurricular life outside of work for a long time there. And so we would have the scanner on for entertainment instead of like what most people would do, listening to the radio. I mean, you would just have it turned on and scanning these frequencies, listening for police or emergencies or people's cordless phones, and you would walk by and just, hear what you heard, whatever was being broadcast at that time, or if we were in the living room reading, it might be on. So it's kind of like background noise, but just of things that were going on around the city. One of the things that was really eye-opening when I was in Spokane was that was around the time that the World Wide Web really took off. We moved to Spokane in 96, so I first got on the web in 95 and was on the internet in 94, but 96, 97, around that time, people started finding out about the web and using their phones to call and order things. So it was not uncommon. I would say this was a daily occurrence, in fact, to hear people's phone conversations on the scanner where they would call and then order things by reading their credit card number over the phone. Still happens today. People still do it, not as much, but I always wanted to find these people, and I've never ever used any of that information maliciously or anything like that, but I always wanted to find these people and just, let them know that I'm listening to them give their credit card freely over the phone. It was just definitely a strange experience. We also had a neighbor that was a police officer who would call his buddy every night and talk about, all the beautiful women he had pulled over and how he had tried to get their phone numbers and how they were going to hook up and all these things. It's people are very different, of course, in their personal life than they are in their public life. And so it was interesting, just to hear, and these are people that we didn't know, but just to hear these conversations. So it was very interesting, but also at a time you feel almost like you're being voyeuristic. Well, you are being voyeuristic, I do know that a friend of the family, let's put it that way, once heard a conversation by their neighbors saying something about them that led to a long feud. So, those are, in the movies you see people saying, oh, well, get on a landline or whatever. But it is true. I mean, there are people out there listening to conversations. So, one of the funniest stories in regards to having a handheld scanner is on the weekends. Years ago, I used to go over to my friend's house, and my friend lived by himself, and he's a little off-kilter, a little off the beaten path. And so I would go over there on the weekends, like late Friday night or late Saturday night. We would play video games and do whatever. And so occasionally I would take the scanner over to his house. And his next-door neighbor was going through a divorce at the time. So for a year or two, we had always seen a car over there with kids. And then for a while we hadn't seen anybody over there, just the one car. So I take the scanner over to my friend's house, and we're listening to the scanner, and we hear a conversation where a man is talking to a woman, and all of a sudden, they start talking about my friend. And they start talking about how odd he is, how his father comes over and mows the grass, and what kind of a weirdo he is. And, of course, it's not about me, so I thought it was hilarious. My friend did not think it was quite as funny. But that was kind of an eye-opening experience. You don't think about your neighbors. I don't think about my neighbors. I don't ever see my neighbors. I don't go outside. But, I don't think about my neighbors, like, what do they think about me, or are they talking about me on the phone? I would never even dream of that. But so it was obviously a weird... not only a strange conversation, but just a weird coincidence on the timing that we would overhear that conversation at that time. And then after that, my friend didn't want me to bring the scanner over anymore. So that cured him of that. With cell phones and cordless phones moved many of their frequencies to the 900 hertz range. So when I saw that happening, I started trying to tune in on my scanner and found out that that range was blocked. My scanner jumps from about 860, I think 870, something like that, up to 1300. So there's a giant dead section on my scanner. Now, old scanners, back in the old days, you could actually upgrade or change the frequencies it listened to by replacing the crystals that went in, and the crystals are what actually tuned the radio, but of course with modern solid-state technology, that's not possible. And so I went on the internet and I Googled the model of scanner that I had to find out about that, and so I found that information that in the United States, handheld scanners were programmed to block out those frequencies. But the exact same model of scanner in other countries like Mexico and Canada do not have those frequencies blocked. So about $100 later on eBay, I had the exact same scanner from Canada being shipped to me. And the scanner that I got from Canada does pick up those frequencies. And, you know, now most cordless phones broadcast like at the 2.7 or 4.7 ranges, so higher ranges than what my scanner will do. So it was kind of a moot point, but it just made me mad that that someone had blocked those frequencies on my scanner. So so now I have two scanners that look identical, but one picks up. I used to joke that it translated people's conversations into Canadian, but I don't think that it really does that. But anyway, what you find out, I mean, about your neighbors talking on their phones and on people's cell phones is that most people are boring. You know, my old neighbors were these old ladies who would talk about quilting for hours and hours. And, you know, listening to the police scanner, unless you live in a pretty active area, there's a lot of dead time and just not overall very interesting to listen to. I mean, I guess the excitement wears off. And then you're just kind of left listening to, you know, what was interesting starts just sounding like noise. Over the last several years, something that has come out, when I first got my iPhone, I went in the App Store and I was looking for different applications, and I found one, there are several of them that are radio scanners. Now, I guess I should backtrack. For years, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes as well, there are websites that you can go to that are basically repeating radio signals from other cities. So even though these type of radio scanners don't have a long distance, you know, that they can broadcast, but people pick those frequencies up locally and then stream them onto the internet. So you could go to these websites and listen to streams from cities all across the country. But what was really interesting was, like I said, when I first got my iPhone and I was looking through the App Store, I found several applications that do the same thing. So the one that I have here is called 5.0 Radio. And actually this is 5.0 Radio HD because I have it on my iPad. But when I open it here and I pull up the menu, you can browse scanner feeds from all over the country. There are the top 100 feeds. You can add your own feeds. So in this iPad app, all the feeds for Oklahoma City are built in. So here's Oklahoma City Police, Oklahoma County Sheriff and Fire, Edmond Police and Fire. So all the areas around me are built into this app. So I don't have to use my scanner anymore. This just, other people are streaming those feeds out onto the internet. If I go look at the top 100 scanner feeds built into this, the number one is Chicago Police and Fire, and that's what I was streaming at the beginning of the show. Right here off the top is LAPD Citywide, Logan Police, Chicago Fire, what are some of the other ones here? San Diego, Columbus, Montreal, Detroit, that's probably a busy one. Now, the difference between this and actually having a scanner is you can only pick up frequencies in this that other people are broadcasting or streaming for you. So, and really thank goodness that you can't pick up cell phones or cordless phones with an app like this. But anything, you know, basically emergency frequencies, stuff like that people want to listen to, now you could just do it either with an app or through a website. So one last thing I wanted to talk about was number stations. And number stations, they almost fall outside of the scope of this podcast, but they're so interesting, and I've been reading about them for the last week, so I wanted to mention them. One of the things that gets broadcast are these really odd signals that are out there, and for a long time, people didn't know what they were. This is just a short sample of a signal that broadcasts from the middle of the Soviet Union. So this signal does this 24 hours a day, all night. But occasionally the signal stops, and of course people have been recording this signal for years, waiting for it to do something interesting. On August 2010, the buzzing stopped, and the following message was broadcast in Russian.
УЗБ-76, УЗБ-76, 93, 882, на имена, 74, 14, 35, 74.
What we now know is that there are signals like this all over the world, and they appear to be communications between governments and spies. They are using what is called a one-time pad encryption, which means if you don't have the original source, it's impossible to decrypt these series of numbers. But governments, it's very inexpensive for them to broadcast these lists of numbers to get messages out. It's very inexpensive for spies to intercept these messages. All they need is a radio scanner with a big antenna. So even if you pick up the signal or the frequency and hear the message, you still can't descramble it. And don't think that our government doesn't do this as well, because there are lots of number stations being broadcast from here, apparently, to spies all over the world. So just kind of a little interesting phenomenon, one of those things that are being broadcast out there in a radio frequency land. So if you have a big enough antenna on your scanner, probably more of a mobile radio or a radio that would be more permanently in your house, but you can pick these up today. So, well, that's pretty much it for my knowledge of radio scanners. I do still have my scanners. I don't use them very much anymore. I don't have a need to know when cops are headed my way. I do occasionally run the app when I'm laying down for bed, and I'll listen for things going on, but largely what you find is most cities have a lot of alarms that go off that police have to respond to, and a lot of domestic batteries. That's mostly what you hear on the scanner, so it's less interesting and more depressing. But they are still fun to play with, and it's interesting to go out every now and then just to see what you can pick up and see what people are broadcasting and what they don't know they're broadcasting. So, anyway, this concludes episode 120 of You Don't Know Flack. I considered doing the show about MAME cabinets this week, but I had such a crappy week at work. I didn't feel like working on this after work, so maybe next week in the evenings I'll put together some more information about MAME cabinets. Thank you to all the listeners. Thanks to everybody that supports the show. If you have any show ideas or feedback, anything like that, you can email me at robohara@robohara.com. You can always get the latest episodes on iTunes. Search for You Don't Know Flack. There's an RSS feed. There's also a Facebook page for You Don't Know Flack. So if you want the latest information, if you want what's going on with the podcast before it airs, you want to know when it's going to air, always check that page. That's all I've got. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next week with episode 121 of You Don't Know Flack.